My mother once told me that the biggest thing on my mind right now is how to keep our lawn green. For years, my mother struggled with our short, wilting, slightly yellow, mushroom-growing, weed-haven, rabbit-nested lawn. I didn't think grass was that big of a deal, but I will admit it was a tiny bit frustrating seeing the difference between our neighbors' pristine and green lawns and ours. When I came to America at the age of 5, I'd been a very reluctant traveler. Indeed, when my parents had asked me half a year before if I wanted to go to the US, I had confidently told them no. For me, English was a language I'd spent an hour half-heartedly learning in my Beijing preschool. Boston was a city I thought was the capital of the country, and America was this mythical land whose shores everybody appeared to talk about. Even as a sheltered preschooler in Beijing, I'd already had visions of the American dream. I didn't have a name for it yet, but somehow that picture of a white suburban house with a picket fence was already in the back of my mind. Although I don't remember much from those early years of my life, it was probably much to my delight that our first house in America was white, suburban, and partially picket fenced. Indeed, my first few years in the US could very well have been described as a blissful honeymoon. Young Sophie had not yet opened her eyes to the concepts of wealth inequality, minimum wage, and health care. My first winter was that of 2015, Snowmageddon. As the bed of snow rose and rose until it was taller than me, my father had built an igloo out of a cardboard box in our backyard, complete with a sled ramp, that I spent many happy hours in. As a child who had barely even seen a single flake of snow in China, America was looking out to be everything I thought it to be. Of course, that didn't mean I didn't struggle with American culture. That year, I'd be enrolled in preschool, where I learned through much struggle and disappointment that the little English I had learned in China was actually British English, meaning that favorite was not spelled F-A-V-O-U-R-I-T, and that gray was spelled with an A and not an E. The next year in kindergarten, I would tirelessly chase other girls around the playground, asking them the only English phrase I'd perfected: "Would you play with me?" And I would wonder with a smile on my face as to why they would always run away whenever I approached them, and why they would shout "tag" whenever they touched me. As I grew older, my enchantment with the American dream slowly began to dissipate. As much as America was fun, it was also burdensome. Even though I arrived in the US with minimal knowledge of English, I was the first and only person in my family to reach fluency. When I was 12 years old and my mother got a heat stroke in Arches National Park, it was I who was the one filling out the emergency room forms and digging through her wallet looking for credit card numbers and insurance. My father, a published data analyst in China and a brilliant orator in Mandarin, could only watch on as I raced through the forms. Even now, as my parents' English skills have improved, they still often require my presence on mundane tasks. A trip to the Home Depot, Marshall's, the supermarket. At times I felt like a kind of insurance. As long as I was there, there would be no question of not understanding, of misunderstanding, of buying the wrong things, or missing important details. For children, the American dream promised a childhood. Yet it was the very pursuit of this dream that threatened mine. By the time that I'd reached high school, the American dream, a prize I thought was nearly a guarantee if you could just make it to America, was starting to look very different. With colleges and jobs on the horizon, it suddenly seemed like I would need to climb a mountain just to get a basic entry-level job in the field I would like to pursue. Everybody seemed to know somebody. Politicians as neighbors, doctors as parents, researchers and professors as close family friends. And I knew nobody. As I looked for a summer job, my mind made brief flashes between the offered wage and Boston's sky-high rent prices. And as college acceptance rates dropped and their tuitions rose, and word reached me about the terrors of job hunting and looking for an internship, even the basic comfort seemed mildly impossible. Never mind achievement of success and the American dream. In class, we read F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby and dutifully debated color symbolism, class differences, and Fitzgerald's portrayal of the American dream. But beyond civil class discussions, I felt exactly like Gatsby, chasing a dream forever present, but always out of reach. So, what do you do when you realize that the place you thought was it isn't? When the place that you thought held the key to all of your problems actually didn't? The reaction varies. Some people deny the challenge to their belief. Others might double down on their convictions. Yet more will decide that the newfound evidence is enough to change their mind. These are all reactions that I've heard of and seen of from other immigrants or children of immigrants. But one must also realize that a simple physical existence does not give anything their power. So what does? What does give things their power, their connotations, in the context of the American dream, the allure? The more that I looked to the immigrant community around me, my parents, family, friends, and a large part of the Chinese community I grew up around, I realized that the American dream is not vested in America as a piece of land, but the systems that it has. And the factors behind those systems have changed throughout time, which is why the dream feels so impossible now. So in order to keep the American dream alive, to make it better, it needs to change. And I believe the way to keep the American dream alive is to flip it on its head. It is time for the American dream to get a complete rebrand. See, we often think of the dream as a solo performance. We celebrate the self-made immigrant who's pulled themselves up with their bootstraps. We see them internalized in the media in books like Kelly Yang's Front Desk, which follows 10-year-old Mia Tang as she manages a motel's front desk, or in movies like Lee Isaac Chung's Minari, which follows the Yi family's life in rural Arkansas as they chase their American dream. This term, a self-made immigrant, sounds inspiring when you hear it, but it comes with an unnecessary cost, one that many of us know all too well. We don't need more immigrant role models. We need a system that does not require teenagers to help prop up their families, a system that preserves childhoods, a system that does not make the white hairs on your parents' head grow at an astronomical pace. It's no issue to look up to and acknowledge the immigrants who have made it big with next to nothing due to infinite sacrifice, dedication, and hard work. But the thought that one must fight for opportunity, must exchange sleep, health, and social lives for success should not be normalized. Stop romanticizing hardship, and then we can begin to make the dream easier and more accessible for everybody. The American dream does not need to be defined by how big or small it is. A dream to become fluent in English is as much of an American dream as a dream to become a millionaire. What matters most is the sentiment behind it. And so the American dream does not need and should not be represented by people who are special. It should be represented by normal people with normal capabilities. And the focus should always be on the work to be done, not the unicorn success stories. And those are the two tenets the new American dream should be shaped by. Thank you.